Yeah, thanks for staying to listen. And I'm actually going to use some survey information, including some from your survey. So I'm very keen on the surveys, as you'll see. And yeah, I'm going to probably fall off the stage at some point, but I'd prepare you so you're not shocked. What I'm going to talk about is Agile. So looking at not how to make an organization agile, but whether or not an organization is really capable or ready to move to agile. Because many organizations in Korea, I imagine, are being tempted to move to agile when they're looking at all of the really impressive figures for how much agile gives you, extra productivity, etc. But what I want to see is a way of whether or not we can tell this is a good way of doing things. So what I'm going to look at is the difference between adopting agile and actually doing a complete agile transformation. I'm assuming that we have very few agile gurus in the room, in which case I will offend very few people, because I'm going to look at whether or not we use gurus or whether or not we should use evidence to decide on whether or not to move to agile. I've come up with 6 questions that I think organizations should ask themselves before they go agile. And then very briefly at the end, I'll show you that there are actually some tools that support this agile readiness. And just so that you're not going to fall asleep, do you know how to use this? You need to go to menti.com on your smartphones. Whoa, 100%. And then put in the code, which is up there, up here, 305036, and then vote. So at the moment, we've got 2 people. One of them has completely gone agile. And and now we're getting closer to what I was expecting. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not the people in this audience, given that you actually knew you were coming to a talk on Agile, come up with the same results from a month ago when it was a general audience of software testers. Come on, I've got 9 people here. Are you all asleep? Is the technology too complicated? Your smartphone batteries have all run out because you've been spending the whole day looking at your smartphones. Are you expecting this to be the same as global results? Well, given that we haven't got a lot of time to wait for more of you to work out how to use the buttons, so we're getting about 3/4 have used it on some projects, 1/4 aren't using it at all, and just for 6% completely. Well, let's look at what the results are globally. So what I did was I looked at the top 5 quality surveys, and your survey is the green one. QA intelligence? No? Well, which one is it then? It doesn't matter. Oh, okay, it doesn't matter. But your one is in one of these. Okay. Okay, whatever. These actually show that if we look at executives who answer the create the World Quality Report, 99% believe that they've moved to Agile. As we go down, the lowest one is at 63% versus just 7% waterfall, which means the other 30% are doing something in between, maybe some hybrid. But the numbers, as you can see, worldwide are actually much higher than they are for this audience. So the potential to move to Agile is quite high. So when we decide to move to Agile, we have a couple of options. We can go for adoption. If we go for adoption, what we do is we can choose one project to start with, maybe, and we'll choose a project that is small and easy. We won't look at changing the whole organization. And if we're going to do this, we'll normally look at adopting tools, adopting techniques, adopting practices, and then forcing, by using the adoption of those practices, forcing the idea of Agile onto the projects that we've chosen. If we do it this way, what do I mean by the tools, practices, and techniques? Well, maybe I wouldn't use this terminology, but this is from the 12th State of Agile survey. The numbers don't change much over the years. So, as you can see here, if we're looking at the tools, we're doing things like getting people to use a unit test tool. At the bottom here, we're getting people to use continuous integration tool. Now, one of the nice ideas about doing this is that most people working in IT are geeks who like technology. You give them new tools, and they're generally going to be happy to use those tools. So getting them to move to this step shouldn't be too difficult. If we now look at the techniques, then the techniques, top technique there used by 90% of organizations who've gone Agile is our daily stand-up. Really easy to build into an organization, and it gets Agile at that level in really quickly. Retrospective, so process improvement, 85%. Sprint iteration planning at 88%. Notice, though, we've got release planning at 67%, so 2/3 of these people who think they're going Agile are not doing pure Agile. They've actually decided that releases are okay. And we've got down the bottom here Kanban, and then we can give them some practices as well. Continuous integration, well, we got that at 54%. The actual tools were 52%, so the numbers are relatively consistent. At the top here, 3/4 of the organizations are doing unit testing. So what are the quarter of Agile projects doing that aren't doing unit testing? That seems to be a really strange Agile project. And we've got 46% of Agile projects not actually doing continuous integration. But if we actually take these practices and we force our Agile teams to actually use these practices, these techniques, these tools, then what we're doing is we're actually forcing our Agile team to do Agile. And by all of these measures, we would count them as being Agile. Now, if we go for this approach, then generally people say, well, actually, this will get you most of the way there. It will get you about 100% increase in productivity. Well, 100% increase in productivity is really good. But one of the problems is, if we go for this approach, after a little while, we find that people revert to going back to what they were doing before. So although they get a 100% increase in productivity in the relatively short term, in the longer term, if nothing else happens, that gradually drops down. So what we really need is Agile Transformation. With an Agile Transformation, what we're looking at is a long-term change. Now we're looking at a long-term, we're looking at across the whole organisation. So rather than just picking off easy projects, what we're looking at now is saying everyone in the organisation will now be educated and support Agile. Of course, moving to this approach is much slower because we've got many more people to move across, many more people to train, for instance. Now, if the whole organisation is doing it, we can actually apply it to large and big complex projects. If we're going to be Agile, though, we do different things. On top of the tools, techniques and practices, now we apply the Agile Principles on a day-to-day basis. We have Agile Values and we have an Agile Mindset. Now, we could argue for a long time about what's included in there, but just to give you some idea of what I would expect, Agile Principles, really easy. We can just get those out of the Agile Manifesto. Agile Values, well, typically we want trust between the different team members, we want respect, and we want courage. So we want people to be able to try things and be allowed to fail. So they have to have the courage of actually trying things, but actually the respect and the trust from the other people to say, okay, well, you tried that, it didn't work, let's try something else. And an Agile Mindset, of course, lots of definitions of how what attributes come with an Agile Mindset, but we want people to be positive. We want them to actually try things. We want them to say, okay, if it fails, what can we learn from that failure? We want them to say, I'm building this for the users. I'm not building this for me to actually give myself a day-to-day challenge. I won't put the most complex thing in because it's most interesting to me. I'll put the thing in that is actually of most value to the user. We want it to be team-driven so that individuals don't choose to do things which are best for them. They choose to do things which are actually best for the team, which might mean sharing unique knowledge that they currently have with other team members, which many of us don't like doing because if we've got unique knowledge, it makes us really important in the team. But if you're going to actually be Agile, then you need to be sharing that knowledge with other people. We would expect to improve. So it not just be something that happens if we're lucky when we do a retrospective, but something that we're expecting on a day-to-day basis. So every time we do something, we should be looking for opportunities. And we need to be adaptable. So if the users say, oh, we know we told you we wanted that in the last sprint, but now we've changed our mind because we've got more experience or because we've got more competition down the road, we should be saying, okay, well, we're doing Agile. That's what we expect. We'll adapt to that. If we move to this approach, being Agile, the actual transformation, instead of getting the 100% increase in productivity, it suggested that we could get a 300% increase in productivity. And of course, if we've moved the whole organisation to Agile, the chance of sliding back is much smaller because now everyone, 100% of the organisation, has actually gone through the education. So if we're going to work out whether or not we're ready to go Agile, we typically go and talk to an Agile guru. We call someone in and ask them, what's your opinion? This is where we are. Are we good enough? And our guru comes in, given that we can afford the guru, and the guru asks us lots of questions, and the aim is to answer, are we ready for Agile? And what we'd really like is the guru to actually say yes or no. And of course, if they say no, we would expect the guru to charge us lots of money to change the answer to yes. But of course, the guru's a consultant, so the guru's not actually going to say either of those things. The guru's going to say, it depends, and charge you loads more money anyway, just to get that information. I would argue that going the guru approach is not the best approach. We've got enough data now that we can actually go for an evidence-based approach. So if we want to answer this question, I would suggest we go and actually look at what lots of people have told us. And we can look at the different surveys. And if we look at the different surveys, one of the things we can find is what people believe cause Agile failures. The other thing we can find out is what challenges people had when they adopted Agile. Now, if we know these two things, then we should be able to come up with some readiness questions based on those. We want to minimize the causes of Agile failure, and we want to address the challenges. And actually, what we'll find is the causes and the challenges should be really quite similar. And in fact, we'll see that they are. Now, we've got an evidence-based approach. Now, where do we get the evidence from? Well, the most respected survey on Agile is the State of Agile survey, and the 12th one was published in 2018. And what you can see here is it covers the challenges when adopting Agile. And what we can see at the top there, the first two are organisational problems. So the organisational culture is not good at helping us move to Agile, which might be why organisations choose to only go for single projects, because if the organisation is not helping you, then maybe you can get some localised Agile, and maybe if they see it works there, maybe the organisation will spread it to more projects. As we go down, we see inadequate management support, and the next one, lack of skills, insufficient training, lack of business and customer availability as we go down. So this data is readily available. Now, this is just from one survey, but what we could do is go back, depending on how far we trust the surveys and how relevant they are going back, but we could go back maybe 5 surveys, and what we would find is we'd get really similar results. And in fact, we can see that because if we look here, this is a different survey. This is a Forrester one, which you would have to pay several $1,000s for. But as you can see, basic results are the same. Culture and behaviour is the top scoring problem. Lack of skills, lack of executive leadership. So we're getting confirmation from a different survey. If we go back 2 years, so this is the 10th State of Agile survey, we can see the causes of failed Agile projects, and up at the top there, company philosophy and culture. As we'd expect, it matches with the 2018 challenges. We have lack of experience with Agile methods, lack of management support, another cultural problem, but in this case, support for cultural transition. Because if we're going to move from traditional and we're going to move to Agile, it's a transformation. So, what are my top 6 big questions? Well, fairly obviously, I chose organisational issues to start with. And here's 3 of the different figures. We've got 2 from the challenges and 1 cause of failure. And these are all organisational culture, company culture, resistance to change. And I would suggest what we need to address is What about the organisational structure and our Agile teams? And what are our organisational measures of success? So question number 1, will you dismantle your organisation's hierarchical structure? Well, I'm not asking you because you're Korean, and you're not going to dismantle your organisation's hierarchical structure very quickly. But if you want to actually transform to Agile, you need to actually seriously consider this. You need to break the silos. You can't have everyone, each specialism working in a separate silo. You need teams which actually are cross-functional, teams that can do everything to get you from a requirement to a piece of deliverable code. So we need, okay, we can have some silos. Sometimes we'll need specialists, and the specialists we can't afford on every team, so maybe we can create teams of specialists. We have to get rid of the managers, because Agile teams are facilitated, they're not managed. So we need to make these managers and change them into facilitators. Of course, some of the skills that managers provide us are actually specialist skills. So we can move those managers and make them into specialists. So if, for instance, we've got a test manager, then that test manager could become a test strategy specialist. But we wouldn't need a test strategy specialist 100% of the time in every Agile team, in which case we're going to put them along with the other specialists. Of course, if we try and take managers and take away their management title, they're going to resist that. They've probably spent 10, 20 years getting that title. They're not going to be happy. Agile teams need to be empowered. So we need to give them that power. We need to actually say to them, you can make those decisions. It will be very difficult if people are not used to making decisions to actually get them to make decisions. And we need to be careful about the half measures. If we just go for adoption, and here's our hierarchical structure, if we just go for adoption, what we do is we just work at this level. We just take each of the teams and say to them, oh, okay, you can be Agile, and we have all these Agile teams at the bottom here, but we've still got the complete management structure. If we're going to transform an organization to Agile, it needs to be a far flatter structure. If we're working on traditional projects, we have a different set of measures of success. So typically, are we delivering on time and budget? Well, probably not if it's a traditional project. Traditional projects normally overrun on both of these. One of the great things about Agile is, given that we know how many people are working on it, we basically know what our budget is on an iteration-to-iteration basis, month-to-month basis. We can make a decision at the end of each sprint, do we carry on? Are we delivering value, more value than we're actually spending on our Agile team? If it's traditional, are we meeting the specification? Well, if it's Agile, we don't have a full specification, so we certainly can't use that as a measure. Are we following the process? Well, quality assurance says we should follow the process. But if we're going to Agile, the Agile team are allowed to change the process on a sprint-by-sprint basis. So there's no point measuring, are we actually following a process that was set up 2 years ago, because that process may well have changed. So that's not worthwhile. Also, we're probably still doing appraisals of all the individuals. If it's Agile, we're trying to actually encourage people to work as a team, not as a set of individuals, in which case we need different measures. And so I'm going to jump over this, seeing as we're a bit short on time. So if we actually look how success is measured in Agile initiatives, you can see some of the measures are very similar. On-time delivery. Well, that was one of the things we'd expect on a traditional project. But top of the list there, Agile is user-centric. Agile says we're delivering stuff for the users. It's not just to keep ourselves getting paid every month. Top of there is the customer happy. And actually, although it's not on there, one of the other really useful measures is, do the team actually think they're happy? Because if the team think they're happy, then you're likely getting better productivity and quality out. Okay, what about experience and skills? Because we need different skills if we're going to go Agile. As we can see here, lack of experience with Agile methods, insufficient training and education, lack of skills and experience with Agile methods. So how are we actually going to address this? Well, we can employ people who actually know what they're doing. But we're not going to get rid of everyone, so we need to train people as well. But these are two separate things, and we need both of them. So, next question, are you willing to buy in Agile team members? It isn't enough to simply buy in coaches who are going to give advice for the first 3 to 6 months. If you're going to get an Agile team to move fully to Agile, where they're making decisions, where they're not expecting a manager to tell them what to do every 4 hours, day, 2 days, 3 days, but actually take full responsibility for a sprint that might last 3 weeks, then you need people put in the team who have actually done this before, who know that it works. Because it's all well and good trainers coming in and telling you, yeah, you've got to have trust, respect, courage, whatever. Unless you've got people who've actually done it, it won't work. So you're going to have to go out and buy people in. Also, we'll need to get coaches, we'll need to get training. So we're going to buy some people in. Next question, will the whole organisation be trained in Agile? Well, it has to be. If we're going to transform the organisation, they need to all be educated. In my experience, when I actually do consultancy on Agile, highest reason, top reason for Agile projects failing is not the Agile team doing anything wrong. It's the rest of the organisation not having been trained in Agile, so they don't understand what their responsibilities are. So obviously we have to train our IT staff. We need to train the developers, testers, business analysts, etc. But our customer needs to know what their job is. They need to know that if they're the product owner, they have to be available every day. Not just, oh, yeah, I'll be ready next week. Send me an email with the questions, because our Agile team haven't got time to wait a week to get the response back. And the users need to be there every sprint to do acceptance testing. So they might be really important people. They might be earning lots of money. But if they want a new Agile system, then they have to be there every 3 weeks to actually do some acceptance testing. Now, we can compromise a bit on this, but they have to know that there's a responsibility, not just to do acceptance testing, but actually, when we need to know exactly what you want on this, that they're there to tell us, because our requirements are going to be really high level. We're going to be working with user stories, a sentence describing a requirement. We have to get extra information, and if we don't get it from the product owner and the users, well, we're going to make guesses, and those guesses are most likely going to be wrong. Okay, management support. Well, inadequate management support and sponsorship, lack of management support, lack of support for cultural transition. So we need support from the top. It's no good IT saying, oh, we're going to go Agile, if the CEO thinks, oh, well, we'll let IT do something nice that will keep them happy for a couple of years. It has to actually be wider than that. And if we're going to transform an organisation, we need proper change management. No, you're right, I can't see the time because there is no time. So, next question, is the CEO really convinced about Agile? If the CEO isn't convinced, don't even bother starting. You need support from the top. The CEO is going to have to tell people below him at a high level, you've got to support this. The business has to be able to give support to the IT teams. You can't just say, okay, well, let the IT do it, but the business carry on as usual. It won't work. The top of the IT department has to actually strongly believe this will work. And of course, as I was just saying, we need support from the business. And my sixth and final question, will you appoint an Agile champion? Transforming to Agile is for the whole organisation is a major undertaking. We need change management. We can't just hope everything will work together. We can't just hope that the training for the IT teams dovetails perfectly with the training for the business. Someone has to actually manage this. Someone has to manage the order that we bring in the tools, the practices, the techniques. So we have to do it in a planned manner. Therefore, we need a change plan. We need a champion to actually do this. And if the organisations had bad experiences in the past with change, we're going to have to put even more effort into this. Okay, finally, there are some tools available that do this. And here's a list. And you can see that, well, you can go and look these up using Naver or Google. These tools, some of them are guru-based, some of them are evidence-based. I guess I can say some of them are evidence-based because at the bottom there we've got the STA tool. And so I'm just going to show you what you typically get out of one of these tools. So at the top level, you would typically get something like this. They really like spider charts. And as you can see here, this is from the STA tool. It looks at 6 different areas. Is the organisation ready? Well, on this one, it doesn't look like it. The organisation needs to do more work. In fact, yeah, they're probably not going to do that well at looking at this. Things are going to have to change before it's even worthwhile starting. And on technology, really poor. For each of these, we would actually go down a level so that we can actually see more easily the areas where we need to improve. So this is looking at the management aspects. And here you can see, well, actually, the estimation works really well. Maybe they're doing planning poker or something. Down here, failure acceptability. Management actually allow people to take chances. They allow people to try things, and if they fail, they don't get punished. In fact, they get encouraged. Okay, you tried that. What can we learn from it? Let's have another go. If we use this tool, there are, I think, about 71 questions overall to give us the full set of information. So, in conclusion, these were the 6 questions. Well, you've just seen those, so I'm not going to read those again. If we go for Agile adoption, and I'm not saying that Agile adoption isn't the best way to start an Agile transformation, but given that I like evidence-based approaches, there isn't enough evidence to tell me that's the best way of doing it. I can tell you, though, from the data that we've got and that I've shown you, that we need to change the organisational culture, and we've got to have pure management commitment. Everyone on the management side has to actually support it. Moving to Agile isn't technical. Getting IT people to adopt new technical stuff, tools and techniques, is relatively easy. getting them to think in a different way, changing their mindset, really much more difficult and needs a planned approach. Readiness tools, well, they're only going to help you so much. You will actually, I'm afraid, still probably need an agile guru. But obviously, be careful who you get. Okay, I think questions, I'm not going to accept questions now because I recognise that we are a bit behind. So if anyone's got any questions, I'm here after this and I'm here tomorrow. Feel free to come and talk to me or email me a question if you're too shy. Okay, thanks very much.